The Galactic Empire of Jothrex prided itself on order, ceremony, and the quiet confidence of civilizations that believed history had already chosen its winners. Their star maps were old, their fleets vast, and their arrogance carefully cultivated over millennia. Humanity, by contrast, was new, loud, and irritatingly informal. Humans smiled too much. They asked questions instead of declaring answers. They said, please in rooms where others demanded obedience. Imperial scholars classified them as socially erratic omnivores with a disturbing tendency toward improvisation. When the first border conflicts ended in uneasy ceasefires, the Empire concluded that humans survived through luck, noise, and an excessive willingness to die for abstract ideas. That assessment would soon become the most expensive mistake the Empire ever made, although at the time it felt comfortable, reasonable, and correct. The capture of the 3 human generals seemed to confirm everything the Empire believed. The ambush occurred during a neutral summit, in a station heavy with banners and ritual light, where weapons were forbidden and trust was supposedly mandatory. General Evelyn Cross had noticed the energy readings shift 30 seconds before the doors sealed, but she had smiled anyway, folding her hands as if this were merely another tedious negotiation. General Maria Alvarez had muttered something about bad seating and worse coffee, while subtly adjusting her stance. General June Park had said nothing at all, her eyes cataloging exits, angles, and faces. When the guards came, the women did not resist. Resistance, after all, implied uncertainty, and they were very certain about how this would end. The cells beneath the station were clean, precise, and designed for efficiency rather than cruelty, which somehow made them worse. The Empire did not see itself as sadistic. Pain was simply a tool, like gravity or radiation, applied carefully to achieve compliance. Neural probes traced memories. Sensory fields isolated nerves. Time itself became unreliable. Through it all, the generals remained stubbornly, infuriatingly human. Cross thanked her interrogators for their professionalism. Alvarez cracked jokes that translated poorly, but carried unmistakable contempt. Park observed, memorized, and waited. They spoke to each other in brief exchanges when allowed, trading dry humor and coded reassurances. The Empire expected screaming, bargaining, collapse. What it received instead was patience sharpened into a weapon. High Inquisitor Thrall considered this behavior offensive. Thrall had broken warlords and poets alike, and none had maintained such irritating composure. He increased the pressure, confident that humans, like all mammals, would eventually yield. Commander Zalrath, overseeing security, dismissed the women as symbolic prizes whose value lay in the message their suffering would send. Only Scholar Lume felt the slow unease of something misaligned. Lume studied patterns, and the pattern here was wrong. These humans did not plead. They asked questions about their captors, about procedures, about why certain methods were chosen over others. They thanked technicians by name. It felt less like interrogation, and more like observation conducted from an unexpected angle. When the Empire broadcast proof of captivity across known human channels, it did so with theatrical restraint. The message was simple: surrender disputed systems, accept vassal status, or watch your leaders endure consequences. The images were carefully edited, showing restraint without gore, control without chaos. Imperial analysts predicted panic, riots, desperate appeals. Earth's response arrived 6 hours later, neatly formatted and maddeningly calm. It acknowledged receipt, expressed concern for all involved parties, and stated that the matter would be reviewed by appropriate authorities. No threats. No outrage. Just procedure. Across the Empire, officials laughed. Humans, it seemed, were finally learning their place. In her cell, Alvarez watched the broadcast replay end and snorted softly. "They always think the quiet part means surrender," she said, her voice rough but steady. Cross closed her eyes, breathing slowly, feeling the familiar mental shift from endurance to anticipation. Park tilted her head, listening to something only she could hear, perhaps the distant echo of plans already in motion. None of them doubted what would follow. Humanity had rules, yes, and laws and endless committees, but beneath the bureaucracy lay a simple, terrible constant. Humans did not respond well to their people being taken. Somewhere far from the station, in rooms filled with screens and half-finished cups of coffee, those rules were already being set aside with careful documentation and unanimous consent. Files were opened that had not been touched in generations. Contingencies whispered about in academies became active protocols. The Empire believed it had captured symbols. In truth, it had provided justification. As the lights dimmed for another interrogation cycle, Cross allowed herself a thin smile. "They've crossed it," she murmured, more statement than comfort. Alvarez chuckled, a low sound of genuine amusement. Park simply nodded. The chains were real, the pain undeniable, but the mistake was already made, and it was no longer theirs. Ambassador Nathaniel Cole arrived at the Imperial Concourse without ceremony, without guards, and without visible fear, wearing a neutral suit and a patient smile. He looked like a man waiting for delayed luggage, not an emissary stepping into hostile legend. The contrast was deliberate, calculated, and entirely on purpose today. Most council members dismissed him immediately, cataloging his posture as submissive and his tone as conciliatory weakness. Cole noticed every glance, every twitch of mandible or crest, filing reactions away with the calm efficiency of a man counting cards in a casino he already owned quietly, patiently, smiling, inside always. He spoke first only when invited, thanking the Empire for its hospitality, with the careful warmth of a practiced diplomat. His words were gentle, yet each carried an odd weight, like sandbags sewn inside silk pillows that softened impact while breaking bones beneath polite appearances effortlessly, methodically, invisibly, always there. Questions followed, structured and boring, about trade lanes, cultural misunderstandings, and mutual security assurances. Cole listened more than he spoke, nodding, occasionally scribbling notes, as if the fate of 3 generals were merely an agenda item scheduled between lunch and routine maintenance. Nothing urgent, nothing emotional, nothing rushed, nothing accidental. Thrall presided over the chamber with theatrical authority, amused by the human's restraint. The Inquisitor interrupted often, probing for cracks, savoring imagined superiority, unaware that Cole welcomed interruptions the way hunters welcomed careless movement because it revealed patterns, timing, intent, and confidence, all freely given by arrogant prey, smiling politely. At one point, Cole asked after the health of station personnel, complimenting efficiency and cleanliness. The remark confused translators because it contained neither demand nor concession, yet subtly reframed the Empire as service staff in their own fortress responsible for guest satisfaction, safety and accountability, expectations, consequences, oversight, standards, liability. Lume watched closely, discomfort growing with every exchange. The human did not argue like a supplicant or threaten like a conqueror. He behaved like an auditor, quietly confirming discrepancies while pretending to trust the numbers presented, knowing falsification always collapses under review, scrutiny, patience, and time, especially human time measured. Cole mentioned family once, casually, describing humans as social creatures who disliked unresolved grievances. The translation rendered it harmless. Zalrath laughed. Lume did not. There was something ceremonial in the phrasing, like precedent being invoked quietly, legally, historically, with witnesses, documentation, signatures, timestamps, and consequences acknowledged later, publicly, painfully, irrevocably. Between exchanges, Cole drank water slowly, declining offered stimulants with a polite apology. The delay irritated the council. Humans, they believed, were impulsive. This one treated silence as leverage, letting anticipation ferment into unease until impatience spoke louder than strategy, revealing priorities, mistakes, blind confidence, soft underbellies, exploitable assumptions, everywhere. When asked directly about surrender, Cole smiled wider, as if misunderstanding the premise. He explained that humans preferred review, process, and proportional response. The words soothed the room except for Lume, who heard conditional clauses echoing loudly, endlessly, multiplying implications, waiting for triggers, thresholds, justification, activation, authorization, escalation, release, execution. The Empire announced continued interrogation as incentive. Cole nodded gravely, offering concern without objection. His acceptance felt wrong, like a door left open during vacuum exposure. Thrall mistook compliance for weakness and pressed harder. Confident dominance required momentum regardless of stability, integrity, risk, backlash, precedent, or consequence, ever again soon. After adjournment, Lume approached Cole privately, driven by academic curiosity disguised as courtesy. Cole greeted them warmly, praising intellectual traditions. The scholar asked why humans smiled during loss. Cole replied that smiles conserved energy for action when action mattered, when patience expired, when decisions hardened, when restraint ended, abruptly, violently. Lume left unsettled, realizing the conversation itself might have been the answer. Cole returned to his quarters, alone, finally allowing his smile to fade. He recorded notes not about demands but about tone, timing and arrogance levels across species, ranks, factions, expectations, behaviors, vulnerabilities, escalation, readiness, thresholds, responses, windows, openings. Back on Earth, his report transmitted automatically, bypassing committees already informed. The system acknowledged receipt with a single-line confirmation. Cole exhaled slowly. Phase 2 did not require speeches, only patience and the Empire's predictable overconfidence, which history suggested was abundant, renewable, and reliably self-destructive, given opportunity, time, encouragement, silence. News of the broadcast spread through Imperial space, reinforcing belief in human submission. Celebrations were premature, but loud. Cole reviewed footage of the captured generals once, expression unreadable, then archived it with meticulous care reserved for sacred documents because sacrifices deserved remembrance, validation, justification, authority, and consequence, later, properly, universally. That night he slept briefly, habits ingrained from older wars. Dreams did not trouble him. Calculations did. Every move the Empire made aligned with expectation, each confirming the model. Politeness had worked. The room belonged to him now even while they believed ownership theirs, absolute, eternal, unchallenged, deserved, secure, permanent. In the morning, Cole requested another session, citing clarity and goodwill. The council agreed, eager to finalize dominance. Lume felt dread but lacked proof. Somewhere, clocks synchronized, files unlocked, and systems waited for a word not yet spoken because humans valued timing above spectacle, silence above shouting, inevitability above victory. Cole entered the chamber again with the same smile, same suit, same calm. Repetition reinforced illusion. Thrall mistook consistency for predictability. Cole mistook predictability for opportunity, noting who leaned forward and who avoided his gaze during specific phrases, pauses, implications, threats, concessions, silences, breaths, reactions, tells, patterns, alignment, hierarchy, fear. The agenda shortened. The Empire pressed terms. Cole responded with clarifying questions that delayed signatures. Each delay forced renewed authorization cycles, irritating administrators. Bureaucracy became friction, and friction generated heat. Lume recognized the danger of procedural warfare too late because once initiated, processes demanded completion, escalation, justification, logging, permanence, consequences. A minor official mentioned historical myths during translation calibration, referencing a human cautionary figure. The word passed untranslated at first. Cole's pen paused. He requested accuracy, politely. The corrected term echoed through the room, unnoticed by most but registered deeply within archival systems. Logs, sensors, records, triggers, references, flags, alarms. Lume noticed Cole's eyes then, briefly empty of warmth. The scholar understood instinctively that names mattered to humans. Myths were instructions. Stories were warnings. The Empire laughed at legends, unaware they had just acknowledged one aloud in a chamber designed for obedience, not consequences, not memory, not retribution, not survival. Negotiations adjourned with promises of progress. Cole thanked everyone sincerely, wishing them productive cycles. The sincerity unsettled Lume more than threats would have. Predators that thanked prey after studying them were rarely bluffing, especially when documentation proved consent, acknowledgement, and procedural fairness before irreversible outcomes, collapse, loss, reckoning, fallout, aftermath. Cole returned to his quarters and finally allowed himself coffee, grimacing at its quality. He transmitted one final message, encrypted and brief. It contained no emotion, only confirmation. Somewhere, something vast shifted from standby to attentive readiness awaiting permission, justification, alignment, consensus, legality, and moral clarity, all achieved, quietly, completely. On the station below, the three generals endured another cycle. Their composure never broke, because it did not need to. The polite man had entered the room, and rooms changed when he decided they would regardless of chains, walls, empires, histories, beliefs, arrogance, cruelty, pride, mistakes, witnesses, records, time itself. The empire slept comfortably, satisfied with leverage gained. Cole reviewed star maps, tracing supply arteries and political fault lines. He did not smile. Satisfaction came later. For now, precision mattered, and the enemy continued cooperating beautifully by doing exactly what arrogance always did: predictably, loudly, confidently, disastrously, publicly, inevitably, completely. Lume submitted a quiet inquiry into human strategic history, receiving redacted summaries and warnings. The scholar felt very small reading them. Patterns emerged of patience, provocation, and overwhelming response. The polite phase always came first, followed by phases unnamed, rarely recorded, legally justified, emotionally cold, structurally devastating, and historically final. Cole prepared briefing materials no one outside Earth would ever see. He labeled files carefully, choosing neutral language. Words shaped memory. Memory shaped judgment. He intended the galaxy to remember this sequence very clearly from beginning to end, from mistake to consequence, from smile to silence, from courtesy to reckoning. Another day passed. Another message from the Empire arrived, increasingly impatient. Cole responded with reassurances and delays. Each exchange narrowed options. The path ahead was fixed now, paved with choices already made by arrogance, cruelty, assumptions, rituals, hierarchy, pride, impatience, and a fundamental misunderstanding of human restraint, limits, endurance, intent. In the council chamber, Thrall boasted of control secured. Applause followed. Lume remained silent, watching a projected human smile freeze on the screen. The scholar wondered when politeness ended and something far older began, because history suggested beginnings were quiet, orderly, reasonable, and disguised as courtesy, process, negotiation, patience, peace. Cole closed his terminal and stood, stretching slowly. He looked entirely ordinary, entirely human. Somewhere beneath the station, chains rattled. Somewhere beyond mapped space, systems aligned. The polite man was finished being polite soon, inevitably, decisively, lawfully, thoroughly, permanently, and with documentation proving why, how, when, and who exactly mattered. The Empire still believed it held hostages. Cole knew better. The mistake was already complete, irreversible, and recorded. He allowed himself a brief smile, not of humor but of acknowledgement, before returning to work, because work now meant preparation, alignment, restraint, verification, authorization, patience, sequence, execution, aftermath, responsibility, closure, history. Lume drafted a personal log, sealing it privately. It contained one conclusion, repeated thrice. Humans were not chaotic. They were conditional. Violate the condition, and order ended. The scholar feared the condition had already been violated irrevocably, catastrophically, demonstrably, publicly, systemically, thoroughly, completely, and beyond reversal, appeal, negotiation, delay, mercy. Somewhere in the Empire, alarms tested fine and were ignored. Somewhere on Earth, clocks synchronized again. Cole reviewed one last checklist and nodded. The room had been polite. The next would be honest about consequences, accountability, reality, scale, inevitability, survival, power, memory, warning, legacy, aftermath, judgment, truth, finally, now begun. The first sign that something had changed was not an explosion or a transmission, but silence. Across Imperial space, routine status pings failed to return. Navigation buoys blinked once and went dark. Fleet captains waited for orders that never arrived, assuming a minor delay, then an error, then a localized failure. Nathaniel Cole watched the reports arrive without visible reaction. Hands folded, expression neutral. Baba Yaga did not announce itself. It removed assumptions. The Empire had built its confidence on constant confirmation, and when confirmation vanished, so did certainty. Cole had warned them politely, indirectly, and repeatedly. Now the warning phase ended. Systems once thought isolated began responding together, as if they had always belonged to a single organism, merely pretending to be separate until now. Imperial Command attempted diagnostics, only to discover their own tools locked behind permissions they could not override. Artificial intelligences reported compliance, while quietly executing different instructions. Supply manifests reconciled perfectly while shipments never arrived. Nothing burned. Nothing screamed. The absence of violence unsettled commanders more than chaos ever could. Cole observed the unfolding cascade with professional focus, noting timing, spread, and reaction curves. Baba Yaga was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a doctrine built from human habits, assumptions, and historical scars. It exploited the Empire's faith in hierarchy by severing the links between levels, leaving authority intact but useless. Control existed, but it could not move. Power remained, but it could not reach. On the station holding the generals, alarms triggered and then silenced themselves. Lights dimmed to emergency levels, then returned brighter than before. Guards hesitated, weapons uncertain whether commands were valid. Evelyn Cross felt the shift immediately, the pressure in the air changing like weather before a storm. Maria Alvarez laughed softly, a sound halfway between relief and anticipation. June Park closed her eyes, listening to the hum of systems aligning to unfamiliar rhythms. They said nothing, conserving energy, trusting the timing. When the doors finally opened, they did so without violence. Human operators stepped through with practiced calm, neutralizing threats efficiently, almost apologetically. The rescue was not dramatic. It was precise, fast, and personal. Cole appeared on a secure channel as the generals were extracted, his image steady, voice level. He asked after their condition as if calling colleagues after a delayed flight. Cross reported succinctly. Alvarez requested coffee. Park confirmed data integrity. The exchange carried warmth beneath restraint, shared understanding forged by preparation and consent. Cole acknowledged them and closed the channel, returning focus to the wider field. The Empire began to realize it was not under attack in the way it understood. Worlds remained intact. Fleets remained armed. Yet nothing functioned as intended. Baba Yaga moved through infrastructure, law, and expectation, turning the Empire's own systems into barriers against themselves. Scholar Lume watched the collapse unfold from a secure archive, horror dawning with every report. This was not improvisation. This was rehearsal executed at scale. Patterns emerged that mirrored human conflict responses documented in restricted files. Delay, isolate, overwhelm, then offer terms framed as assistance. The Empire had tortured symbols. Humanity responded by removing foundations. Lume understood then that the broadcast had never been leverage. It had been permission. Across client species, communication channels reopened carrying human reassurances and offers of protection. Many accepted immediately. Others hesitated, then watched neighbors stabilize while Imperial support failed. Allegiance shifted without battle. Authority drained away quietly, leaving emptiness where certainty had lived. In the council chamber, Thrall raged at subordinates who could not obey. Zalrath attempted mobilization orders that looped endlessly. Systems reported success without movement. The room filled with overlapping voices and rising fear. The names spoken earlier echoed now with terrible clarity. Baba Yaga was not a monster to fight. It was a condition triggered by cruelty. Cole transmitted a single message to Imperial leadership, carefully worded, legally impeccable. It cited violations, documented timelines, and consequences already underway. It offered assistance in restoring order under new terms. The message was polite. That politeness terrified them more than threats ever could. As the generals reached safety, Alvarez finally slept, exhaustion claiming her laughter. Cross-reviewed incoming data. Already planning stabilization protocols. Park began assembling records, ensuring the story would be told accurately. None of them felt triumph. What they felt was gravity, the weight of inevitability fulfilled. Cole joined them hours later via secure link, his tone unchanged. He thanked them for their endurance. He did not apologize. They had known the cost. Humanity always counted cost before action. That was the difference. The Empire had mistaken patience for softness, restraint for weakness, courtesy for surrender. Baba Yaga corrected that misunderstanding thoroughly, without spectacle, without mercy, and without haste. Across the galaxy, whispers replaced laughter. Empires recalculated. Histories updated themselves in real time. Cole stood alone for a moment, staring at a star map now reconfigured by absence and alignment. Baba Yaga would sleep again soon. It always did. But the lesson would remain, etched into systems and memory alike. Humans had walked politely into the room. Now the room belonged to consequences. The Empire's collapse did not arrive as a single moment, but as an accumulation of realizations, each heavier than the last, until denial itself became impossible to sustain. Systems that once defined authority, now demanded human authentication. Councils convened only to discover their resolutions required external validation. Pride withered into panic as leaders recognized that the infrastructure of their dominance no longer belonged to them in any meaningful sense. Nathaniel Cole watched the process unfold with the same calm he had carried into the first negotiation, because collapse was not chaos when engineered properly. It was sequence. It was consequence. It was the end state of choices already made by others who believed themselves immune to repercussions. Cole addressed the fractured Imperial Council one final time, his image projected into chambers that now felt smaller, dimmer, and older. He spoke without triumph, without anger, and without apology. He explained the procedural reality of what had occurred, step by step, citing their own laws, treaties, and emergency statutes. The torture of the generals had not only crossed a moral line, it had activated dormant clauses buried deep within human diplomatic frameworks. Those clauses existed because humans assumed cruelty would eventually surface. They always planned for the worst, not because they desired it, but because experience demanded it. The Empire had provided the final data point required to move from contingency to execution. High Inquisitor Thrall attempted to interrupt, but his authority carried no weight now. The room listened instead to the human voice calmly dismantling centuries of assumed supremacy. Cole revealed that Baba Yaga was never intended as conquest. It was containment, designed to neutralize empires that demonstrated systemic abuse of power. Humanity had no interest in ruling the galaxy directly. Rule required constant enforcement. Influence required only precedent. The trap, Cole explained gently, was never meant for fleets or worlds. It was built for arrogance. Once arrogance acted predictably, the mechanism closed itself. Scholar Lume listened with something approaching relief, because understanding replaced terror. The Empire had not been destroyed out of spite. It had been corrected. That distinction mattered, even if the cost was unbearable. Around the galaxy, former client species began restructuring their governance under human advisory frameworks that emphasized redundancy, accountability, and consent. The shift was not bloodless, but it was survivable. Humans offered aid, not as saviors, but as auditors ensuring the same mistakes could not be repeated easily. The phrase Baba Yaga spread not as a threat, but as a warning embedded in policy discussions and cultural memory. The three generals addressed a closed human assembly soon after, their presence quiet but commanding. Evelyn Cross spoke of patience as a strategic resource, one more valuable than firepower. Maria Alvarez spoke of morale, humor, and the refusal to let cruelty define identity. June Park presented evidence, timelines, and archival records, ensuring no part of the event could be distorted into myth alone. Together, they framed the narrative carefully, because humans understood that stories shaped future behavior more effectively than fear. Baba Yaga was not a monster to worship. It was a consequence to avoid. Cole stood apart as the session concluded, watching the generals receive acknowledgement without celebration. He understood their burden would not end with survival. They would be remembered as symbols whether they wanted that or not. Later, alone, he reviewed the final reports confirming the Empire's dissolution into autonomous regions under monitored transition. The trap had closed fully. Humanity's role shifted from executor to witness, then gradually to background presence. That, too, was intentional. Dominance was unnecessary once behavior changed. The goal had never been to be feared forever, only to be believed once. In the ruins of imperial authority, Thrall was taken into custody by his own people, stripped of title and certainty. Zalrath vanished into obscurity. Lume documented everything, determined that future scholars would understand how civilizations fell not through invasion, but through their refusal to recognize limits. Across human space, the event entered education as a case study rather than a legend. Children learned that politeness was not weakness, and restraint was not mercy without conditions. Adults remembered that the line existed for a reason. Cole prepared to step away from diplomacy, his role complete. He recorded one final message for archival purposes, summarizing the sequence in precise language devoid of emotion. History, he knew, did not need embellishment. The facts were sufficient. Before disconnecting, he allowed himself a moment of reflection, not on victory, but on the quiet tragedy of inevitability. He would have preferred a different outcome. Humans always did. Planning for darkness did not mean embracing it. As the galaxy stabilized into a new equilibrium, the name Baba Yaga faded from headlines but not from awareness. It lingered in cautious decisions, in revised protocols, in the hesitation before cruelty justified as necessity. That was enough. Cole closed the file and looked out at the stars, ordinary again, distant and indifferent. The trap had always been set, not for enemies, but for the moment someone decided humans would not respond. They always did, eventually, politely first and honestly after.